In today's module, we're going to be looking at large language models, and we're going to actually not only look at what it is, but how it actually fits into the big picture. So let's first of all start by looking at the context of LLM. And from the previous course, we discussed about artificial intelligence. We also discussed that machine learning is a subfield of artificial intelligence, and deep learning is a subfield of machine learning. We also covered in the previous course generative AI and where that actually fits in. So in this specific course, if we look at where LLM fits, it actually fits right next to generative AI, and it is a subfield of deep learning. And in the previous course, we learned that neural network plays an important role in deep learning. And just like generative AI uses neural networks, large language models also use neural networks. Now, if you look at the diagram, you'll actually notice that there is a somewhat an overlap of generative AI and large language models, right? And that overlap is very important because when you look at large language models, it is not completely separate from generative AI. It actually works in conjunction with generative AI. So if you look at generative AI and you look at behind the scenes, where is the actual brains, where is the actual that intellectual aspects of it, that's where large language models come into play, right? So let's actually now look a little bit more deeper into exactly what is large language models. And if we take the acronym and we kind of like focus on each of the letters, it will help us to draw a better picture of what large language models is. So first of all, large, right? What do we mean by that? In actual fact, what we mean by that is that we are working with a large data set, right? So these are models of some sort, and large data is the volume of data that we need to use to train the models. Like, for example, if you were in the business of creating sneakers, right? Nike would actually have a huge, large data set of all the different types of sneakers, right? And it wouldn't just be just limited to Nike sneakers, but it could also be including other brands as well. So that's a large data set there, right? And if we look at language here, language is a form of notation in terms of how are we interpreting this model, right? So in the most basic concept, if you look in terms of programming languages, right, there are different programming languages like Java, Python, C, etc., right? And again, we're using some kind of language to create the models here, just like you would use some kind of programming language to create an application, right? And finally, models, right? All this kind of evolves around the concept of models, right? So we have large data sets, we have a language notation that we're using to implement this, and a lot of models here, right? So one of the key elements of large language models is that in any kind of like scenario, it is the core of what we are actually doing, the actual brains, the actual neural network aspects of how it's being able to generate all that future stuff for us, right? So one of the key advantages with large language models is they are somewhat generic, right? So when we create a foundation LLM, we're creating a generic model to which we can then specialize and we can then create more specific direction that we want to go into, right? Now, another key element here is that in addition to having specific language models, we can also tune and fine tune the models to that perfection, that point that we want, right? So think of these models as something that starts off by training, and then we continually fine train those models, right? So we have a large data set. We actually have the tuning aspects of it where we actually take the models, we continuously enhancing it, and we're actually making it better over time. And that's what the ultimate goal here is, right? And when we put this all together here, and going back to our sneakers example, is we get these models in place where we're continuously fine tuning it with new stickers, with designs and everything else, to the point that it can actually generate new content for us as a means of generative AI, right? And that kind of concludes today's module on large language models. Thank you.